So, let's talk about intermittent fasting. You've heard of it, right? It's one of the biggest things in health and wellness, with people praising it for everything from weight loss to better brain function. But there's this one really common side effect that trips a lot of people up, the fasting headache. And we're going to dive into this because the real story behind it is way more surprising than you'd think.
And that brings us to this really fascinating paradox. Seriously, for every person who says fasting gives them a splitting headache, you can find someone else who swears it's the only thing that's ever cured their migraines. So what is going on here? Does it cause headaches or does it cure them? Well, what's wild is that the answer is yes, to both. And you can see this conflict playing out perfectly right here. On one side, you have the official medical view. Fasting is a known, well-documented trigger for headaches. But on the other side, you've got real people, like this user on Reddit saying, "I found that fasting is most effective for getting rid of their migraines." So to solve this mystery, we have to start by understanding the case against fasting.
Okay, so let's look at why, from a purely biological standpoint, skipping meals can lead directly to head pain. The science here is actually pretty clear, and this kind of headache even has an official name.
Yup, it's called a headache attributed to fasting, and it's a real thing, officially recognized in the International Classification of Headache Disorders. The definition is pretty specific. It's a diffuse, kind of all-over, non-pulsing pain that shows up after at least 8 hours without food. And here's the kicker. It goes away after you eat. So what's actually causing it?
Well, science has zeroed in on 4 main culprits. The biggest one by far is hypoglycemia, which is just a fancy way of saying low blood sugar. Then you've got dehydration, because we get a lot of water from our food. Caffeine withdrawal is a huge one if you're a coffee drinker. And finally, fasting can actually ramp up stress hormones like cortisol, which is another known headache trigger. But let's really focus on that first one, the low blood sugar.
This is where it gets really mind-blowing. Your brain only makes up about 2% of your body weight, but it is an absolute energy hog. It gobbles up about 20% of your body's glucose supply. So when you fast and your blood sugar starts to dip, your brain is one of the first to feel that energy shortage, and it lets you know it's not happy by sending out a pain signal.
And look, if this has happened to you, you are definitely not alone. A 2023 study found that a whopping 61% of people get headaches when they try intermittent fasting. So case closed, right? Fasting causes headaches. Well, not so fast. Because this is where we turn to what people are actually experiencing, and the story gets way more complicated.
And this brings us to the people's verdict. The official science is one thing, but the lived experience is way more nuanced. We dove into a Reddit thread where migraine sufferers were talking about this exact thing, and wow, were the responses all over the place.
First up, you have people who perfectly line up with the scientific consensus. This user, Celestial Typhoon, says, "Being hungry is a migraine trigger for me," and they follow a super strict eating schedule to avoid it. For this whole group of people, a missed meal is the enemy. Simple as that.
But then you scroll down and see the complete opposite. User Roxy031 found that going on a ketogenic diet, which is very low carb, didn't just get rid of most of their migraines, it also made it easier for them to fast. And right there, that's our first big clue. The kind of food you're eating when you're not fasting seems to change the entire game.
And just to show you how deep this divide runs, another user, AXW3555, jumps in and says, basically, "Whoa, you just called my worst trigger missing a meal, and one of my best fixes, carbs, positives. So that's a hard no for me." It's like they're living in 2 completely different metabolic worlds.
Then we get this absolute gem of a comment from Downtown Salt 2758, and this is what really starts to connect the dots. They said that once they stopped eating high-carb junk food, they could suddenly fast without getting a migraine. And their conclusion is brilliant. The sugar crash is what triggers migraines, not the fasting. And that single insight is the key to solving this whole paradox.
Okay, so let's solve this mystery once and for all. Because both of these things can be true. Fasting can be a trigger, and it can be a cure. The thing that makes all the difference comes down to one simple concept: stability. So here it is, the big reveal. The pain isn't actually coming from an empty stomach. The real culprit is blood sugar instability. It's not the fasting itself that's the problem. It's the metabolic roller coaster your body was on before you started fasting.
The best way to picture this is to think of 2 different modes. On the left, you've got the blood sugar roller coaster. If your diet is full of refined carbs, your body is just used to these huge spikes and dips in glucose. So when you suddenly skip a meal, your blood sugar doesn't just dip, it crashes. And that crash is what triggers the headache. But now look at the right, the cruise. If you're on a low-carb or keto diet, your body is already adapted to burning fat for fuel. Your energy is way more stable, so when you fast, there's no big drama, no crash.
To put it another way, for a body that's running on sugar, fasting can feel like you're running out of gas and hitting a wall. But for a body that's fat-adapted, fasting is just a smooth, stable cruise. And that right there explains everything. It's why one person's trigger is another person's cure. It all depends on what fuel your body is used to running on.
So this is all great information, but what can you actually do with it? If you want to get the benefits of fasting without those killer headaches, how do you actually pull it off? Well, that brings us to your toolkit, a practical game plan for headache-free fasting.
Here are 5 tips, all based on the science. Number 1, and this is the big one, transition gradually. Don't just jump into a 24-hour fast on day 1. 2, stay hydrated, and super important, add electrolytes. 3, manage your stress. 4, if you're a coffee person, taper your caffeine intake slowly. And 5, when you do eat, make it count by focusing on nutrient-dense meals. Let's zoom in on a couple of these.
Okay, that gradual transition, it is non-negotiable. Seriously, start with shorter fasts, maybe 12 or 14 hours. Do that for a while, and then slowly increase the window over weeks, not days. This gives your body the time it needs to basically rewire its metabolic machinery, to get better and more efficient at using fat for fuel. That's how you avoid those dramatic blood sugar crashes.
And this tip really brings it all home. What you eat when you're not fasting is just as important as the fast itself. When you prioritize protein, healthy fats, and fiber during your eating window, you're basically setting your body up for success. You're building a foundation of stable blood sugar, and that's the secret to headache-free fasting.
So when you think about it, a fasting headache isn't just some random, annoying pain. It's a signal. It's your body communicating with you, giving you feedback on its metabolic state. So the question really isn't about whether fasting is good or bad. The real question to ask yourself is, what is my body trying to tell me about the fuel I'm giving it?